All right. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to start with the introductions. And just as a reminder, this session is also being live streamed, and I just turned that on. So if you go to YouTube now, it should actually be there. But my name is Alicia Capello, and I will be the moderator for this session titled From Cornerstones to Train the Trainers, Adapting Library Instruction with AI in Mind. And I'm just going to start by pasting a couple of quick items in the chat that just remind you about the code of conduct as well as the email address that you can contact if you're experiencing any technical issues. That'll get answered very quickly. I've already had to email them once this morning. We ask that you keep yourself muted during the session, and if you have a question, we're going to ask that you use the Q&A function to ask that question, and you can type in a question at any time during the presentation, but we're going to wait to answer those questions until after the presentation is finished. And as I mentioned, the session is being recorded, but it's also being live streamed. It's the first this year, so we are live on YouTube at the moment. And if you need to, you can turn on the captions by clicking the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. And so now it is my pleasure to introduce our four presenters, all of which are from UCLA. And so in no particular order, we have Michelle Brasseur, who is an instruction librarian at the University of California, Los Angeles, who has over 10 years of experience in academic libraries, including subject liaison service, outreach, and designing and leading library instruction programming for a variety of undergraduate, graduate, and faculty learners. We also have Shelby Hellman, who's a research initiatives and technical information librarian supporting broad research services and engineering disciplines. We have Hannah Sutherland, who is an open science librarian for the physical sciences and serves as the liaison to the Department of Earth, Planetary, and Space Sciences in the Department of Atmospheric and Ocean. I I did not copy and paste that full title. I'm sorry. It got cut off at the oceanographic. I'm assuming. My apologies, Hannah. And Alex uh, Selokaya, who is the Rothman Family Food Studies Librarian and Teaching and Learning Services Librarian for the Health Sciences at the UCLA Library, and she's a liaison to the Fielding School of Public Health. All right, and if Alex, if you would like to share your slides, and you guys can take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me get that going. Okay, can everyone see my slides? Yes. All right, so thank you so much, Alicia. Again, my name is Alex Solodkaya, and today my colleagues and I will be talking about our experiences adapting library instruction to the new AI-saturated education landscape. Our talk, titled From Cornerstone to Train the Trainer, Adapting Library Instruction with AI in Mind, will walk you through some of the approaches we've taken to teaching information literacy in the current moment. We'll highlight some examples of some of the classes we've taught, the lessons we've learned, the collaborations that have been most helpful and sometimes challenging, and the framing theories and principles that have been the most useful in building our approaches. So here's an overview of our agenda. I'm currently We've done the introductions, and then I will be talking about the core principles and considerations. Then I'll pass it to Michelle to talk about courses and workshops that we've collaborated on. Shelby will take the one-shots, and then Hannah will walk us through teaching when uncomfortable with AI. And then we'll jump into Q&A. When considering instruction opportunities that involve AI tools or concepts, we take into account the following four factors. Having these as a set of core or guiding principles helps situate us in the larger conversations on AI use in education. The first principle or factor is an awareness and acknowledgement of our own expertise and role as librarians. We're not programmers or computer scientists or experts on the history and development of AI. Of course, we can educate ourselves on those topics and present bits and pieces of them to contextualize other content, but that's not our core expertise. When meeting with faculty or instructors or other collaborators, we emphasize that our role as librarians means that we have expertise in information creation and organization, information seeking behavior, research methods and practices in specific disciplines, etc. We try to build our lessons with the solid base of information literacy and layer other concepts on top. We also recommend acknowledging this in the sessions themselves so that participants understand our background and approach when presenting for them. We also try to focus our sessions on the development of a critical mindset when approaching information literacy generally and AI more specifically. Critical information literacy is an important framework that guides us in this approach. Critical InfoLit calls on library and knowledge workers to identify and examine systems of power and oppression that shape information economies and to act in the service of dismantling those systems. It's a call to action that can be employed in our discussions of AI in the classroom. Of course, we want to encourage critical analysis of AI outputs, as the answers chatbots and other Gen AI systems provide are often incorrect. But we also attempt to bake in discussions or activities that encourage critical consideration of ethical issues such as regulation, privacy, bias, environmental impact, and cognitive debt. Excuse me. We also want to encourage students to make informed decisions about how and when to use AI, or if they want to use AI at all. In the current moment, there's a lot of boosterism of AI systems and tools, as well as a lot of fear mongering. We feel that it's our responsibility to provide students with information on the downsides as well as the benefits so that they can make up their own minds. And then finally, when teaching AI tools, we want to emphasize transferable skills and make sure to scope the tool to the task rather than give a one-size-fits-all approach. Now I'll highlight some useful considerations or best practices, which is in quotations because it's really just a loose set of suggestions when teaching lessons on AI systems and tools. So first of all, it's always useful to gauge learner experience with AI use. You may have to take a different approach if the learners are very engaged with AI or experiencing AI hesitancy or a mix of the two in one classroom. Next, if you're working with faculty or instructors, it's useful to understand their expectations of AI usage in class. You may want to ask for AI policies for their courses or their full syllabi ahead of time. It's also good to be aware of any existing instructional policies in your workplace that govern AI usage. Sometimes instructor policies and institutional policies may differ, so finding ways to navigate that contradiction may also be necessary. And then occasionally instructors don't necessarily know what they want you to talk about when discussing AI. In these cases, it's important to have an open dialogue about what they're experiencing in the classroom and what their specific concerns are related to their assignments or course content. You also want to consider how much engagement with your class or audience you want to encourage. Do you want them to test AI tools or systems? Do you have the expertise to walk them through a particular tool? You'll also want to consider the time allotment needed for these activities. And then another time consideration is the increase in prep time necessary when developing sessions on AI. Over the past few years, we found that workshops and lessons on AI systems take longer to develop than the standard research skills or resource-based lessons. This is likely because AI is a developing field, we're new to the systems, and they're rapidly changing. So next, my colleagues will give examples of some of the ways we've applied these foundational concepts and best practices in various instructional contexts. And I'll pass it to Michelle to talk about some examples of workshops and full credit courses that she's taught and collaborated on.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, so yes, I'm Michelle Brosser. I work with English history and disability studies. So I think I'm the only one of us who is currently working with any of the humanities disciplines. So that will kind of color how I talk about some of these examples. So I've had the opportunity the last couple of years to work with Research Practice 120 course, which has historically been taught by librarians. Normally we rotate. I'm taking on more of a adaptive role with it as we adjust for AI. So it's just one small example of the many things that are going on at UCLA. Oh, by the way, good morning to all my West Coast folks. So we're still technically morning. Oh, that's what maybe why you saw us all smile at the beginning. Okay, so Research Practice 120 is a 2 credit hour course. Most of our courses are a quarter long or 3 or 4 credits. So this one is a little bit lighter of a load. We only meet once a week for about an hour and 50 minutes, and that has its own limitations as far as what we can cover during a session. So it is required for the Mellon Mays Undergraduate Fellows Program. So students are accepted into that program with a research topic in mind that they're developing for a final research project that they're going to complete for their program. But this course, we've also opened it up to anyone who's working towards a capstone or honors thesis or anything like that. And we scaffold an assignment over the course of the quarter, usually an annotated bibliography or a literature review to help them prepare to complete that larger research assignment for their whatever program they're in. So some of the things that we've done to adapt Research Practice 120 for AI in the last couple of years, and especially this past we offer this every winter quarter. This past winter quarter, we did incorporate a large portion of their grade. It's a pass, no pass class, but we still have percentages that help us determine whether or not they're going to pass the class. A large portion of, I'll just talk about it as grade, is based on in-class participation and especially our newly introduced in-class journals. We are using these to replace some of what would have been online discussion board posts. We weren't finding that students were getting a lot of value out of those. We were noticing some that seemed to be AI generated. So having them handwrite in class in a blue book, acknowledging some of the negative associations that some of us might have with those particular types of tools and associating them with tests and quizzes. We talked to the students about expressing themselves freely, making mistakes. I think that's a really important part of the learning process that a lot of our students struggle with perfectionism. That's been a really great experience for me, getting to know the students a little bit better, reading their authentic thoughts, writing back in my own messy handwriting. Handwriting has been a challenge. You'll see some examples in a second. Another thing we did was incorporate an AI in-class AI activity. So we encourage students to pick a generative AI tool of their choice. We have some that are that are offered by UCLA, so they are we have agreements with these companies that they're not going to collect student responses. They're not going to be saved to retrain the model. Students had a lot of concerns about, especially in the humanities, about their own intellectual property and things that they're creating. But we also gave them the option to opt out of the activity this week and to write in their Blue Book journals instead. For next year, I realized we need to develop a lot more structure around an opt-out activity because I was surprised at how many students chose to opt out. Now, maybe they just didn't want to do the in-class activity. We can't be sure, but we did get some really great discussion about why they were opting out, and a lot of the concerns around environmental impact, social issues, plagiarism, intellectual property, really great discussions with this group of in a very cross-disciplinary group of undergraduates. And so for next year, we maybe will pair some of the students opting out with the students who are opting in and give them an opportunity to discuss what they find one-on-one. Another thing we wanted to mention is that because this is a small seminar course, it doesn't have as many opportunities to be scalable to some of your large lecture courses. And so I've heard from some colleagues that I've worked with in some of my humanities disciplines about iClicker quizzes for larger lecture halls. And potentially I'm thinking about incorporating a Google Doc to be able to monitor their progress with their final assignments. And that will also give us an opportunity to comment in the document in real time. So it'll be more of a collaborative process in the future. That's something we're still developing possibly for next year. And I also did want to give a shout out to, I'm not the only one teaching a 4-credit course at UCLA. Michelle Lee and I have been co-teaching it the most recent year. But I did want to shout out Sylvia Page, who works with writing programs, who has been teaching grad professional development 497R, integrating writing and research in teaching practice. So that's another train the trainer type opportunity to talk to these TAs in training about incorporating information literacy into their courses. And they've also added units on AI and critical AI evaluation. So I just wanted to shout out that that's happening as well. Next slide, please. Okay, here's an example of a student response. The student chose to opt out of our AI activity. They mention concerns about water usage. So this was probably a result of our discussions on environmental impact. But also I really appreciated the students' thoughts on wanting to develop their own thinking independently, and also the acknowledgement of having to fact check AI's output anyway. And so now, and in class we talked about comparing to some kind of traditional library resources and strategies about narrowing and broadening topics and developing research questions. And I also will disclose that this student has expressed to me that she's interested in pursuing the master's in library and information science. So yay. So we go ahead and next slide. I won't read the full text of these just for the sake of time, but here was a student who chose to opt into the activity. I think for next year, this is the type of student who I would encourage to write more, given the time that we had. But so again, issues with the quality of the types of sources that AI was using, and I like this student phrases it as flat out lies, whereas AI might, or like some of the people that work with these tools might color that as hallucinations or something similar, but just being concerned about intellectual property as well with this one. Okay, I think we have one more. Yeah, that cat stamps, shout out Michelle Lee. I had star stickers for mine. You would be surprised how undergraduate students are motivated by stickers or stamps. So it ended up being a really great way for us to familiarize ourselves with with their writing style as well, in case I forgot to say that. So here's a student. She mentions her topic of partition of 1947, which refers to India, which can be a topic that's difficult. She had trouble finding sources just because there are differing experiences and opinions of what actually happened, and I thought she had a really great analysis of AI's output as being very general. She's also working on some creative fiction projects based on the lived experiences of people who went through this actual historical event. So she wanted AI to try to write something similar, and she noticed that it chose a male perspective and some other stereotypical approaches to that kind of writing. And then again, criticism of the types of sources used, and even some of the phrasing that she shared about being well documented historical, which she knows from her experience, maybe parts of it are not as well documented. So I think that's really telling about where AI is coming from sharing information, especially about contested kind of issues. So really interesting example. Okay, next slide. Okay, and so as we mentioned, the Cornerstone workshops, that's in our title. So these are kind of the most basic building block of what we want students to learn about information literacy. We offer them every fall, winter, spring quarter in collaboration with the Undergraduate Writing Center and Undergraduate Research Center. They teach some other ones. These three are the ones on the three on the slide are the ones that are librarian led. At the end, I'm going to discuss does it make sense to cite AI? So if in the chat people want to kind of answer this question as I'm talking about some of the other workshops, please feel free. I'd be interested to read your answers. So yeah, does it make sense to cite AI? More on that in a minute. But so we start with developing a research question. This is a lot of talk about topics that they're interested in, that they would want to spend some time digging into, obviously narrowing and broadening topics as we get to a question, turning questions into keywords that'll lead into our next workshop, which is finding sources. The AI element that we started adding to this was thinking about generative AI chat tools as sounding boards, as brainstorming, versus more traditional search methods, things like Boolean operators, and especially subject terms. I get really excited about working with the humanities because these are alternative keywords that we can use for future searches, and it gives us an idea of who's talking about what in the field. And yeah, just kind of comparing traditional library methods of developing our questions versus just asking AI and letting the students think for themselves about what's a better fit, right? So when we get into finding sources, I've found this as an opportunity to promote our Ask Us chat on the library's website, which is still staffed by real life humans, sometimes me, and I think all of us on the panel here too. And that's become a major selling point, even in the one-shots that I teach as well. And I've seen more students using it recently to ask actual research questions instead of how do I return my laptop that I checked out, or whatever other questions we get. So this is an opportunity for students to understand scholarly versus popular sources, how to find them, when in the information life cycle are certain sources published. So that all. AI is one way that we can look into sources, but it might not be the best way. And then finally, collecting and citing sources, which I kind of prepped us on earlier. They always tell them you are a scholar, you are practicing being part of this scholarly conversation. That's why we cite people. I often compare it to tagging someone on social media that you want them to see what your thoughts are on this topic. And obviously, we talk about when and how to cite and some of the more popular citation styles like MLA and APA. But most recently, we changed the title. We added collecting and citing sources in the age of AI. Now, these are obviously targeted towards students, but we had a major increase in attendance. Most of the new attendees were staff and faculty, and I found that a lot for workshops that mention AI. And it's because they want to learn about what we're telling students, and they're trying to learn as much as possible. It was a lot of our teaching and learning center instructional designers, and they asked really great questions as well, and kind of got them thinking more about scholarly publishing and things that maybe hadn't been in their mind yet. So does it make sense to cite AI? I'll hopefully have some time to read your reactions after the fact, but for the just spoiler alert, it depends, right? Most students will immediately say, obviously, yes, you have to cite any source that you use. And yes, they're very well trained in that way, and that's great. But does it make sense to cite AI is kind of a trick question, because one of the reasons we will talk to them about why we cite is to be able to track down the source of that information, the exact same information, but it's going to be different for different people, depending on how you phrase your prompt and when you asked and what version. I did have one student who was in computer science doing actual research with AI and said, I have to cite AI, but I will say which version I used and when, and all the details. That's part of my research. And in that case, absolutely. But for the average student, especially in the humanities, it becomes a similar discussion that we used to have about Wikipedia, trying to track down the original source, but the kind of lack of transparency in some of the AI tools means they won't always tell you where it got its information, like we saw with the student doing research on the partition earlier. Okay, thank you for any thoughts that you added about that. Excited to see those. Okay, go ahead, next slide. Finally, I wanted to share about just some of the workshops that are being developed. UCLA is huge. We have, I think, 10 library locations, a lot of staff, but these are the ones that some of the ones I've been involved with or at least heard of. And the using AI tools ethically and effectively was one that was developed through our now defunct teaching and learning team, teaching and learning functional team. So this was developed with a number of our colleagues, but most recently I taught it with Helen Song, who's an instructional designer, and we introduced some sample AI tools and compared them to kind of traditional library research methods in a more in-depth way than we did in the Cornerstones. The image on the slide is from Connected Papers, which is one of the several, I would say, chat tools that are out there that are pretty popular that specifically target research and academic sources. In the case of Connected Papers, I think the visual aid of seeing who's citing who and like looking at it like a web is very interesting. And I've seen that in some other library tools, like the Gale Digital Scholars Lab will do some similar things. But the limitation of this one was it didn't always have full text, and when it did, it was often open access sources. Wikipedia, I saw a lot of Wikipedia entries, a lot of museum websites, things like that. And then we saw similar things for things like Research Rabbit and Elicit. So we talked to students about how you have access to more through the library. Another project that I worked on as from a train the trainer perspective was the Summer Information Literacy Institute that we've been able to invite faculty and TAs to for a couple of different sessions. We adapted it from the 2022 version to the 2024 version to incorporate more about AI and how it was impacting instruction. A lot of it was centered around the concerns that instructors have about plagiarism, how to spot AI output, how to talk to students about it. And so that led to a lot of these other workshops and things that we've adapted. There's a lot more about workshops and trainings, but I think we'll go ahead and move on for the sake of time. Thank you all.
Okay, so I'm now going to talk through the three main areas we consider when we get AI requests for one-shots, namely scoping based on the course or the program, audience expertise, and discipline. And for each of these areas, we'll share the considerations we take along with some brief examples. So first, before any of our one-shots, we try to fully understand the goals and the context of the course or program we're working with. This could include gathering information on course assignments, programmatic objectives, or understanding where our intervention point falls within the overall curriculum. And especially with AI instruction, we find it vital to be aware of any AI policies. So whether course, program, college, or university level, as these impact the expectations around AI usage. And all of this information gathering happens through open conversations with the instructors or the program managers, usually during meetings. And then based on that information, we will customize each session that we offer. However, there are common concerns or needs across programs that enable us to give instructors different options when we're planning, almost like a menu of options. So things like bias in AI or how to verify results. And this makes it easier to create custom sessions that are a mix of existing and new content rather than having to remake each session each time. So an example of this was a recent course called the Pathways program, where it's a research program for life sciences undergraduate students. And before the session, we learned that this program has students progress through some lab courses, and they're expected to practice writing NIH grants, and that AI is permissible for certain use cases within the course. So therefore, our approach included a mix of standard AI topics, like an activity on how to investigate tools based on the privacy and training data information available. And then we also added in custom components like a pre-survey to understand their usage and a section on alternative grant writing tools that aren't AI-based. Next slide. So then along with the course and program, we try to understand and customize based on the audience expertise level. And so we try and take into consideration their prior experience with both AI, but then also within their fields, and try and understand how they will be using AI and what kind of restrictions they face. Often we find that this audience level consideration needs to work in tandem with the understanding of the program goals as well. And two recent examples of this. So the first was the Center for Health Policy Research, and this comprises of faculty, researchers, and graduate students who are conducting health policy research and want to learn about AI usage within the public health sphere. So given their range of expertise and the niche application of AI, our session was really scoped on the current AI applications in public health and across the university system. And our goal was to create a shared base layer of understanding across the audience members. And so we did less generic topics here and more focus on information within their disciplinary context. Comparatively, we also worked with the medical education fellows recently, and this comprises of active medical practitioners. Many of these practitioners are actively using AI within their practice. And so in this case, we scoped the session to how they could support students versus their own usage of AI within their practice. And so we focused on generic topics like how to teach students to critically evaluate AI results. And so even though their subject expertise level is similar, if not higher, than the Center for Health Policy Research, we purposely did not go in depth on the subject-specific AI resources here, partially because of the goals of the session, but also the fact that these fellows are already using AI, and we as the librarians are not experts in medical use of AI, especially considering things like HIPAA protections and a lot of these other considerations around privacy. But they are not experts in student education in AI, and that's where we can come in and give our expertise. Next slide. So the third component that we take into consideration is around the discipline area of the program or the course. We also gather this, through conversation with the instructors. And generally, we try to understand what are the specific use cases of AI within the discipline, as they can really vary greatly, along with the field expectations around AI usage. Some fields are more excited and actively using AI, while some are more cautious. And so this can lead to different expectations around our sessions. We've also found that data availability differs across fields. Some fields rely more on open data than others that could be included in training data. We do recognize that there are commonalities across our disciplinary instruction, things like the importance of teaching how to critically think and how to evaluate AI, the role of ethics and bias within AI, and the concept that no one tool matches every single task. Naturally, we adjust these concepts based on the discipline we're working with, but pretty much everybody in any discipline can benefit from learning about those topics. And so as some quick examples of how this disciplinary specialization plays out, some of the recent approaches we've taken within our liaison areas, for instance, Alex has centered recent food studies sessions more on literature reviews and comparing AI to search engines. Within engineering lately, I've been focusing more on ethics, as some of the students I work with are actually building these AI systems. And Hannah's recent work with environmental science has centered more on discussions around sustainability and then how to use AI around tools like data scraping, cleaning. And earlier, Michelle had mentioned some of the recent humanities questions that have come up as well. And these are just anecdotal, but they do highlight that each discipline can have slightly different needs when it comes to library support and AI. And so the next slide, to wrap up about our one-shots in AI, we did want to quickly address that there's a common ask of adding an AI section to an already scheduled information literacy session. And so some of the strategies we use include finding entry points within our information literacy framework to talk about AI. So for instance, expanding conversations on how to evaluate web-based information to include evaluating AI results. And we found it natural to pair this AI instruction with instruction on traditional library resources, especially through comparison style activities or discussion. Another thing is that even when we're not directly asked to instruct on AI, we find that it often pops up during class. And so being prepared to discuss common questions is important. Things like, how do I verify AI results? Or why should I use these resources instead of ChatGPT? Often come up during classes. And so we tend to internally share our approaches about how we handle these situations to help each other feel prepared for answering these questions in the moment. In general, we found instructors are eager to include these discussions, especially given the library's role as information experts. So I'm gonna then pass it over to Hannah.
Thanks, Shelby. So I'm going to breeze through some of this, but I do think that it's important to take a moment to acknowledge that there might be a number of reasons why someone may not feel comfortable teaching the use of these tools. It may be that you're not familiar with them, or you just are being asked to discuss or teach them and you don't have the capacity or time to learn. It could also simply be that you do not want to learn or use these tools. I personally do not use AI tools for environmental reasons, ethical reasons, but I'm still being asked to teach them. And through conversations and collaborations with colleagues, I found ways to navigate these requests. Next slide. A lot of my thoughts around this have been informed by my colleague, Salma Abumiz. Salma is a research and instruction librarian at UCLA with a focus on critical pedagogy, and she's developed this framework for thinking about ways to refuse AI within higher education workplaces while still supporting students, and in particular, how that can look in library work. Salma taught this framework to library student workers who do research consultations and are sometimes confronted with questions about AI. It's meant not to be prescriptive. It's about providing options and flexibility for different levels of comfort. Salma's framework is based around the idea of critical refusal, a term from feminist praxis based on the idea that you can refuse to accept the world as it's presented to you and instead advocate for a better or different future. In that sense, it's ultimately a hopeful disposition and an antidote to the narrative of inevitability or techno-determinism, the if you don't learn AI, you'll get left behind narrative, or you have to teach students AI or you're doing them a disservice narrative. It suggests several ways refusal can be practiced, making it flexible for those who have no choice but to engage with AI in some way. Next slide. So how might this look in the classroom? First, Salma says we can refuse the ideological packaging of AI. We're told all the time how great AI is, it's doing all these things, but so much of this hype is just the marketing of these companies down to the term AI itself, which was coined 70 years ago to compare technology to human thinking. So what might refusing ideological packaging look like? If I've been asked to teach about AI, I'll often open the conversation with the question, where do you find information? This almost always leads to conversations including AI. And I always have slides ready that point to the overwhelming inaccuracies of the Google AI overview, as was highlighted in a recent New York Times article. Or I'll bring up the near comical limitations of ChatGPT through something like the viral "how many R's in a strawberry" exchange, et cetera, et cetera. So by resisting the hype of these tools and poking fun at their limitations, we can refuse the packaging as it's sold to us. Next slide. We can also model refusal. We can co-investigate these tools with students. In a one-shot taught with Shelby and Alex, we asked students to pick an AI tool they were interested in and identify what the tool is designed to do and how bias could manifest in what it generates, if the company provides information on training data sets, and if the parent company has addressed potential biases or harms present in their tool. This strategy is great because you do not need to be an expert on a tool in order to provide space for exploration. You only need to provide guiding questions or a structured activity. Students can explore and come to their own conclusions. Another great way to model refusal is to explore options for performing the same tasks with non-AI tools. It's really important to validate and affirm students when they say they use AI for tasks that they feel uncertain about how to approach otherwise. Reading, research, and writing are all legitimately difficult, but this is a great opportunity to offer alternate strategies for accomplishing these tasks. If students need help reading and understanding scholarly articles, point them to the Writing Center or suggest critical reading strategies rather than reading Gen AI summaries. If they need help brainstorming a topic, suggest topic mapping or talking it over with a friend or listening to a podcast for inspiration. Next slide. Lastly, as Salma reminds us, connection is very important. It can be very lonely and isolating to be someone right now choosing not to use AI. I always share with students that I don't use AI for personal reasons, and I don't say this in a manner to shame them. As the saying goes, be hard on systems and soft on people. But making it clear that it's okay to opt out of these tools can empower students who feel similarly, and it might also create space for community and dialogue around these issues. Next slide. So to sum it all up, these are some general takeaways. You can help students regardless of your stance on AI. If you're uncomfortable using AI or uncertain how to teach a tool or are short on time or prep, bringing in a colleague who has shown enthusiasm around AI to help co-teach is a great option, and I'm very grateful to my colleagues here for providing that support for me. It's important to establish a shared understanding of what AI even is or refers to when you first begin talking to an instructor. AI is a massive umbrella term. It differs greatly from field to field, and in itself, it doesn't really mean very much. So it's crucial to understand what all parties are talking about and actually asking for when planning a session. You can create activities that provide space for exploration that do not require you or the student to actually use these tools. And lastly, you can incorporate conversations about AI into larger discussions about information-seeking habits and evaluation of online information. You don't have to do a complete deep dive or major overhaul of a lesson plan to fit in conversations about AI literacy. So that's all we have for you today. And we have, I think, 5 minutes to take any questions. Thank you so much.
So we did get a question in the Q&A that I think would be a great one to answer live. And you kind of started to answer it, I think, Hannah, when we were talking about critical refusal, but maybe the rest of us who have actually used AI in class might have a thought on this. So Katie asked, do you have any examples of AI-related in-class activities you've done in one-shots? My main struggle when teaching AI in one-shots is finding enough time for activities.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I know that's something that whenever we've done one-shots, we take a lot of time to think through, what kind of activities can we fit in so that it's not just like lecture style the whole time. Some of the examples we gave earlier with those classes we worked with, some of the activities we've done, we tend to focus less on like one particular tool and focus more on like guiding students through exploration, which is Hannah touched on as well. So for us, that's, some of those have looked like we've had a Padlet board that has like for each little card, it'll be a question for the student, like what tool did you choose? What are the privacy protections for that tool? What kind of tasks is that tool developed for? And so then students can choose something that's like of interest to them that they're going to use, and then they'll fill that out, and then we'll do a group discussion around that. We've done some other ones too of even just like group thinking around, what kind of activities are better suited to use AI versus really need to have that like human aspect. So that might be like, it used to be when Jamboards are around and sad that they're gone. It used to be way easier when we could use those, but you can do this on like a Zoom whiteboard as well, or in person, like on a physical whiteboard, and where we would have different like tasks defined and have people move them around. So I think by trying to shift away from like focusing on like demoing a tool, that has freed up some space for us to do more activities. And I would love to hear from my other co-presenters about other ways they've added activities too.
Lex, I don't know if you have thoughts on this one, but for me, it's a lot of in-class discussion. And luckily I get to work with smaller groups usually, but even in a lecture, I feel like using specific examples that the students are working, their research topics, their assignment that they're working towards, and then having a discussion about, and I know this isn't really an activity, but if I'm putting them on the spot, then they're at least thinking actively about their topic or someone else's. It's like some of the same discussions that we would have around keywords. So talking about prompt generation, are you getting the same quality of responses from the AI as and then actually taking them through library research and kind of doing a comparison side by side. So I think there've been one or two classes where I've quickly pulled up Google Gemini. Like I mentioned, there are a couple that UCLA sponsors, so that I feel a little more comfortable using those, but I mostly only use it for testing and demonstration purposes. Like Hannah was saying about, I don't use this in my day-to-day life just for ethical reasons.
Yes, I tend to use it as a discussion starter as well. And we do only have a couple of minutes left, so I was gonna put it out to the audience if there are any other questions that folks might have.
Well, if there are no more questions, thank you everybody for attending the session today. And I'm sure all of the speakers would be happy to answer any other questions you have via email if you'd like to contact them directly. And as you might have seen in the chat, Jamie did post a file for the downloading of the slides in the chat, which worked for me, even though the resources method did not work for me. So if you're having trouble downloading it from resources, the chat version should work just as well. All right, thank you everybody, and have a great rest of your afternoon or morning if it's still morning where you are.